welcome back to another episode of Becoming No One. I'm your host, Big Taj, and today we're going to start Stanza 5, Part 1. Now, y'all, I did not want to do another 2-part episode, but my notes for this section, again, were over 20 pages, and that's before I added in my explanations, okay? So there is going to be a Part 2. Part 2 is already written, and it's over 10 pages already, so this is a lot to process in this next stanza, and it does require you to use your intuition because it is really high level occult knowledge. So we're almost through this season, and I'm really proud of our progress that we've made. So we'll hop right into today's episode, and then I'll have an announcement at the end of this episode. So the 5th stanza describes the process of world formation. So it says, first diffuse cosmic matter, then the fiery whirlwind, the first stage in the formation of the nebula. And a nebula is a substance that contains ionized neutral and molecular hydrogen. This is said to be areas where star formation happened. So, again, we are stars in a body, but there's also stars in the macrocosm, okay? So the nebula condenses, and after passing through various stages of transformation, forms a solar universe, a planetary chain, or a single planet. So there is a lot to cover. We'll jump right on in with part 1. Now, stanza 5, part 1 says, the primordial 7, the first 7 breaths of the dragon of wisdom, produces in their turn from their holy circumgyrating breaths the fiery whirlwind. Part A says, this is perhaps the most difficult of all the stanzas to explain. Its language is comprehensible only to those who are thoroughly versed in Eastern allegory and its purposefully obscured phraseology. The question will surely be asked, do the occultists believe in all these builders, Lipicas, the sons of the lights as entities, or are they merely imaginary? To this, the answer is given as plainly after due allowance from the imagery of personified power. We must admit the existence of these entities if we would not reject the existence of spiritual humanity within physical mankind, meaning that we are a physical body with a spirit inside of it. For the host of these sons of light and mind-born sons of the first manifested ray of the unknown all are the very root of spiritual man. Unless we want to believe the unphilosophical dogma of the specially created soul for every human birth, a fresh supply of these pouring in daily since Adam, we have to admit the occult teachings. This will be explained in its place. Let us see now what may be the occult meaning of this stanza. So this first part is just saying that the stanza is hard to explain to anyone who has not studied the occult science in great detail. So again, we're just going to have to use our intuition. Now the next part says, the doctrine teaches us that in order to become a divine, fully conscious God, even the highest, the spiritual primeval intelligence must pass through the human stage. And when we say human, this does not apply merely to our terrestrial humanity, but to the mortals that inhabit any world, i.e. to those intelligences that have reached the appropriate equilibrium between matter and spirit as we have now. Since the middle point of the 4th root race of the 4th round was passed, each entity must have won for itself the right of becoming divine through self-experience. Hegel, the great German thinker, must have known or sensed intuitively this truth when saying, as he did, that the unconscious evolved the universe only in the hopes of attaining clear self-consciousness, of becoming, in other words, man. For this is also the secret meaning of the usual Puranic phrase about Brahma being constantly moved by the desire to create. This explains also the hidden Kabbalistic meaning of the saying, the breath becomes a stone, the stone a plant, the plant an animal, the animal a man, a spirit, and the spirit a god. The mind-born son, the rishis, the builders, etc. were all men of whatever form and shapes in other worlds, and then proceeding Manavantaras. This subject being so very mystical is therefore the most difficult to explain in all of its details and bearings, since the whole mystery of evolutionary creation is contained in it. A sentence or two in its vividly recalls to mind similar ones in the Kabbalah and the phraseology of the king psalmist, as both when speaking of God, showing him making the wind his messenger and his minister a flaming fire. But in the esoteric doctrine, it is used figuratively for the fiery wind, which is a incandescent cosmic dust which only follows magnetically as the iron fillings follow the magnet, the directing thought of the creative forces. Yet this cosmic dust is something more, for every atom in the universe has the potential of self-consciousness in it and is, like the monad of Leibniz, a universe in itself, and for itself, it is an atom and an angel at the same time. Now, this section is just explaining that every being that wants to become a god or godlike has to have an incarnation as a man, but it does not necessarily have to take place on Earth. There is an evolutionary path that must be followed similar to the one on Earth, where you are first a mineral or a stone, which is first density consciousness, then part of the plant kingdom, again, first density consciousness, then animal kingdom, which is second density consciousness, then man, which is third, fourth density consciousness, then a spirit, which is fourth density, fifth density, sixth density, because you're kind of like both, and then God, or returning back to that God energy, seventh density consciousness, manifesting the higher self in this physical form, okay? So the planetary spirits all had to go through this evolutionary cycle as well. Also understand that every atom in the universe has the ability to have self-consciousness. This is interesting to me because if every atom in you is intelligent, then when we are taught in school that, through your nose you smell, through your eyes you see, through your mouth you taste, yes, that is true, but it's a half truth because every atom in your body has the capacity to do all of those things. Every atom is a universe in itself, and every atom is an angel. This is important because this stanza speaks about the fiery wind or cosmic dust, which follows magnetically and directs thought of creative forces. This means that the fiery wind or the cosmic dust is what magnetizes certain ideas and creative thought patterns to us based on magnetism in our vibration. So this confirms that no thought is original and that thought is a frequency you must match to receive the download of unmanifested intelligence. And you can receive this through any atom in your body. It does not have to be a specific medium. Every single atom in our body has its own consciousness, which makes me think about, I can't even remember what movie this was, but at the end of the movie, basically they opened up like a locker and then it zoomed out and it was basically like all these locker doors, right? Of other universes, other whatever. And that makes me feel like, what if we're just the atom in somebody's fucking body experiencing our own fucking consciousness and the cycle is just continuing and continuing and continuing? I don't know. It's something to think about. So the next part says, in this connection, it should be noted that one of the luminaries of the modern evolutionist school, Mr. A.R. Wallace, when discussing the inadequacy of natural selection as the sole factor in the development of physical man, practically concedes the whole point here discussed. He holds that the evolution of man was directed and furthered by the superior intelligence, whose agency is necessary factor in the scheme of nature. But once the operation of these intelligences is admitted in one place, it is only a logical deduction to extend it still further. No hard and fast lines can be drawn. This is just explaining that the modern evolutionary person, Mr. Wallace, acknowledged the existence of this fiery wind when he was disproving natural selection as the sole contributor to the development of man. So science or experts on the subject kind of allude to the existence of this if you needed some type of confirmation. So in conclusion to this first part of the stanza, 5, it's explaining that the second 7 or planetary spirits who are responsible for the shaping, forming, and development of man, also known as the builders, all have an individual consciousness and are deities that represent different archetypes of wisdom. When they were creating the world, they breathed a fiery whirlwind, hence they were referred to as the dragons of wisdom, which is just cosmic dust that assigns intelligence to the specific archetype or frequency of the planet. Also the specific archetype and frequency of us as well. So the fiery whirlwind is actually fohat, which we talked about before. Fohat is the electrifying principle that causes every atom to vibrate and every intelligence in this manifested universe to vibrate or to be in constant motion. Fohat is all the electrodynamic and creative forces. So it's the link between spirit and matter, subject and object. It is in everything and everywhere all at once, but there are two separate definitions of fohat that we need to understand from a macrocosm level and a microcosm level, and that's what part 2 is about to tell us about. Now, part 2 says, they make of him the messenger of their will. The Daizu becomes fohat, and the swift son of the divine sons, whose sons are the Lipikas, run circular errands. He is the steed, and the thought is the rider, i.e., he is under the influence of their guiding thought. He passes like lightning through the 7 regions above the 7 below the world to be. He lifts his voice and calls the innumerable sparks or atoms and joins them together. So part A says, this shows the primordial 7 using for their vahan or vehicle or the manifested subject, which becomes the symbol of the power directing it. Fohat called in consequence the messenger of their will, the fiery whirlwind. Now, Dizu becomes fohat. The expression itself shows it. Dizu is the one real magical knowledge or occult wisdom, which dealing with eternal truths and primal causes becomes almost omnipresent when applied in the right direction. Its antithesis is Daizu Mi, which deals with illusions and false appearances only, as in our exoteric modern science. In this case, Daizu is the expression of the collective wisdom of the Dhyani Buddhas. So this Daizu, which is spelled Dzyu, is actually the origin of fohat and becomes fohat when it's in this activity stage or when it is an active agent of will, which we can just say when it becomes electricity, okay? Helena Blavatsky defines it above as Daizu is the one real magical knowledge or occult wisdom, which dealing with the eternal truths and the primal causes becomes almost or omnipotent when applied in the right direction. But her students use it interchangeably with knowledge and intelligence. Again, use their intuition on this part. To me, this section is using it as knowledge or intelligence. The messenger of their will part is referring to fohat, which is apparently the intelligence transformed into an electrifying principle that fills every single thing that is living. By the end of this episode, you will understand this in totality. Right now, though, with the information that I've given you, I will be jumping way ahead in this episode, and I need to lay it out for you guys, so just bear with me. So part B says, as the reader is supposed not to be acquainted with the Dhyani Buddhas, is as well to say at once that according to the Orientalists, there are 5 Dhyanis who are the celestial Buddhas, of the whom the human Buddhas are the manifestation in the world of form and matter. Esoterically, however, the Dhyani Buddhas are 7, of whom 5 only have hereunto manifested and 2 are coming in the 6th and 7th root races. They are, so to speak, the eternal prototypes of the Buddhas who appear on this earth, each of whom has his particular divine prototype. So, for instance, Amitabha is the Dhyani Buddha of Gautama Sakyamuni, manifesting through him whenever this great soul incarnates on the earth, as he did in the Tsongkhapa. As the synthesis of the 7 Dhyana Buddhas, Avalokitesvara was the first Buddha or the Logos. So Amitabha is the inner god of Gautama, who in China is called the Amida Buddha. They are, as Mr. Rhys Davis correctly stated, the glorious counterparts in the mystic world, free from the debasing conditions of the material life of every earthly mortal Buddha. They liberated Manushu Buddhas, appointed to govern the earth in this round. They are the Buddhas of contemplation and are all Anupadaka, parentless, self-born of divine essence. The exoteric teachings which say that every Dhyani Buddha has the faculty of creating for himself an equally celestial son, a Dhyani Bodhisattva, who after the decease of the Manushu or the human Buddha has to carry out the work of the latter, rest on the fact that owing to the highest initiation performed by one overshadowed by the spirit of Buddha, who is credited by the Orientalists with having created the 5 Dhyani Buddhas, a candidate becomes virtually a Bodhisattva, creating such the higher initiation. So this is just letting us know that there are 7 root races and densities of consciousness to go through. Each density has its human incarnation of a divine being that is free from the illusion of this material world, and they are sent here to help us also become free of this illusion. Now, we have only seen 4 of them, soon to be 5, of these Dhyani Buddhas, because we have only experienced 4 to 5 densities of consciousness or root races. Now, there are still 2 incarnations to come when the time is right. What's even more interesting about this, though, is that the earth is supposedly in this 5th root race, not the 4th. So when people say that people on earth's consciousness got trapped because of all the fear propaganda and the control that these beings that are more intelligent than us are pushing, This should be confirmation because we just entered the fourth density of consciousness back in 2012 as a collective, and we should be in the fifth density of consciousness. Okay, so the fourth density is the heart space, and it's about forgiveness, love, and compassion for other people. Earth itself is progressing, but we should be progressing with it, and that is not happening. And I believe that that's why so many reinforcements and so many eyes are on Earth, and so many beings are trying to help us evolve and ascend, because we are not moving fast enough. Now, this is where it starts to get interesting. Part C says fohat, being one of the most, if not the most important character in esoteric cosmogony, should be minutely described as the oldest Grecian cosmology, differing widely from the later mythology. Eros is the third person in the primeval trinity: chaos, Gaia, Eros, answering to the Kabbalistic Ein Sof for chaos or space or void, the balance all. Shekinah in the Ancient of the Days, or the Holy Ghost. So fohat is the one thing in the yet unmanifested universe and another in the phenomenal and cosmic world, meaning it has two definitions. In the latter, he is that occult, electric, vital power which, under the will of the creative logos, unites and brings together all forms, giving them the first impulse, which becomes in time law. But in the unmanifested universe, fohat is no more this than Eros is the latter brilliant winged Cupid or love. Fohat has not to do with cosmos yet, since cosmos is not born and the God still sleeps in the bosom of the Father Mother. He is an abstract philosophical idea. He produces nothing yet by himself. He is simply the potential creative power in virtue of those actions of the noumenal of all the future phenomenon divides, so to speak, but to reunite in a mystic supersensuous act and emits the creative ray. When the divine sun breaks forth, then fohat becomes the propelling force, the active power which causes the one to become two and three on the cosmic plane of manifestation. The triple one differentiates into the many, and then the fohat is transformed into the force which brings together the elemental atoms and makes them aggregate and combine. We find an echo of this primeval teaching in early Greek mythology. Erebus and Nux are born out of chaos, and under the action of Eros give birth in their turn to ether and Hemera, the light of the superior and the light of the inferior, or terrestrial regions. Darkness generates light. See in the Puranas Brahma, will or desire to create, and in the Phoenician cosmology of Sakonyathon, the doctrine that desires is the principle of creation. So as I said before, fohat has two roles depending on whether we are talking about the unmanifested universe or the manifested universe. In the macrocosm, it is not present until the first ray of light that causes manifestation is present. So it rests in the bosom of the Father Mother when the monad is still one in unmanifested logos, which is the first logos, but it is the love energy. Now remember from previous lessons that love is the logos and that light is the physical manifestation of love. Okay, so it's only makes sense that the fohat is a part of this love energy that is present right in the second logos, or the divine thought that sweeps across the mother deep, or the chaos. Okay, this is the electrifying and activating principle for everything that is manifested. Okay, it puts everything in motion because it physically manifests as motion. So on the macrocosmic level, it is the creative force that divides the phenomenal world from the noumenal world, which is the spiritual from matter. On a microcosmic scale, it is the electrifying principle that sets every living being in the manifested world into motion. It is what connects us all, but the above is of the below and the below is of the above. So we also need to take away that fohat is this love energy, right? So love energy is what connects us all. If you want to become more electric, right, because it's the electrifying principle in the physical manifestation, you have to engage in self-love activities like working out, which moves about your stagnant energy, in turn keeping your energy flowing or keeping you in motion. Eating foods that are good for your body. If you're a non-ether being, meaning you have the neuromelanin in your skin and your eyes, you need alkaline foods and waters, which are whole fruits and vegetables, because you are a frugivore, not a carnivore. Food that grows from this earth contains electricity, right? Because they are still living when you eat them. Meditating so that you can manage your thoughts and your emotions, in turn managing your hormones that are being pumped through your body so that you can raise your vibration. Spreading love, because if you're constantly in this state of love for others and yourself, you're at a high vibration, therefore more electric, more spirit. Don't let that go over your head, okay? Now, I still struggle with this myself, but I'm getting better with it every day, okay? Now, in addition to that, it means that fohat is responsible for our will to create. So if you are struggling to figure out what you want to do, or just becoming more creative in general, it would benefit you again to become more electric, which is increasing your fohat. So just to reiterate, fohat on a macrocosmic level is the divine thought, the idea that sweeps across the mother deep. Remember, fohat is the will of the universe. On a microcosmic level, fohat is the electrifying principle that not only sets us into motion, but it's also the electrifying principle that contains the wisdom that we need. And as I explain this next part, or this third part of the stanza, it'll start to make more sense. Now, the next part says, fohat is closely related to the one life, from the unknown one, the infinite totality, the manifested one, or the periodical maleventeric deity emanates. And this is the universal mind, which separates from its fountain source, is the demiurgos, or the creative logos of the Western Kabbalist, and the four-faced Brahma of the Hindu religion. In its totality, viewed from the standpoint of manifested divine thought in the esoteric document, it represents the host of the higher creative Dayan Kohans. Simultaneously with the evolution of the universal mind, the concealed wisdom of the Adi Buddha, the one supreme and the eternal, manifests itself as the Avalokiteshvara, or manifested Isra, which is Osiris of the Egyptians, the Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the heavenly man of the Hermetic philosopher, the Logos of the Platonist, and the Atma of the Vedan 10, by the action of the manifested wisdom, or Mahat, represented by these innumerable centers of spiritual energy in the cosmos. The reflection of the universal mind, which is the cosmic ideation of the intellectual force accompanying such ideation, becomes objectively the fohat of the Buddhist esoteric philosopher. Fohat, running along the seven principles of Akasa, act upon manifested substances, or the one element, as declared above, and by differentiating it in various centers of energy, sets in motion the law of cosmic evolution, which, in obedience of the ideation of the universal mind, brings into existence all the various states of being in the manifested solar system. The solar system brought into existence by these agencies consists of seven principles, like everything else within these centers. Such is the teaching of the trans-Himalayan esotericism. Every philosophy, however, has its own way of dividing these principles. Now, fohat then is the personified electrical vital power, the transcendental binding unity of all cosmic energies, on the unseen as on the manifested planes, the action of which resembles on an immense scale that of the living force created by will, and those phenomenons where the seemingly subjective acts on the seemingly objective and propels it to action. Fohat is not only the living symbol and a container of that force, but it's looked upon by the occultist as an entity. The forces he acts upon being cosmic, human, and terrestrial, and exercising their influence on all those planes respectively. On the earthly plane, his influence is felt in the magnetic and active force generated by the strong desire of the magnetizer. On the cosmic, it is present in the constructive power that carries out in the formation of things, from the planetary system down to the glowworm and simple daisies. The plan in the mind of nature, or in the divine thought, with regard to the development and growth of the special thing. He is metaphysically the objectivized thought of the gods, the word made flesh on a lower scale, and the messenger of cosmic and human ideation, the active force in universal life. In his secondary aspect, fohat is the solar energy, the electric vital fluid, and the preserving fourth principle, the animal soul of nature, so to say, or electricity. In India, fohat is connected with Vishnu and Surya, in a early character of the first god. For Vishnu is not a high god in the Rig Veda. The name Vishnu is from the root vish, to pervade, and fohat is called the pervader and the manufacturer because he shapes the atoms from crude material in the sacred text of the Rig Veda. Vishnu also is a manifestation of the solar energy, and he is described as striding through the 7 regions of the universe in 3 steps. The Vedic god having little in common with the Vishnu of later times. Therefore, the two are identical in this particular feature, and one is the copy of the other. So this is just my take on it. Electricity is energy. So fohat is responsible for dividing us into consciousness levels, so chakra systems or energy portals in the body. Now these centers are responsible for our evolutionary path. Okay, so fohat follows the direction of the universal mind and acts as the creative force to bring the plan into motion. It's responsible for all the states of being in the manifested universe. Our will is what directs us in this material plane. Well, fohat is comparable to the will of the universe on a macrocosmic level, and on a microcosmic level, it is responsible for electrifying us, and it is the connecting tissue between all of us. It's what connects us to each other. And fohat actually operates not only across the mental plane, but the spiritual and the physical plane. The next part says the 3 and 7 strides refer to the 7 spheres inhabited by man of the esoteric doctrine, as well as the 7 regions of the earth. Notwithstanding the frequent objections made by would-be Orientalists, the 7 worlds of 4 spheres of our planetary chain are distinctly referred to in the exoteric Hindu scriptures. But how strangely all these numbers are connected with the like numbers in other cosmogonies and with their symbols can be seen from comparison in parallelisms made by students of old religions. The 3 strides of Vishnu through the 7 regions of the universe of the Rig Veda has been variously explained by commentators as meaning fire, lightning in the sky, also as the 3 steps of the dwarf Vishnu incarnation, though more philosophically and in the astronomical sense very correctly. They are explained by Ornavabha as being the various positions of the sun, rising, noon, and setting. Esoteric philosophy alone explains it clearly, and the Zohar laid it down very philosophically and comprehensively. It is said and plainly demonstrated therein that in the beginning of Elohim were called Ekads, or one, or the deity is one in many, a very simple idea in the pantheistic conception in its philosophical sense, of course. Then came the change. Jehovah is Elohim, thus unifying the multiplicity and trying the first step towards monotheism. Now to the query, how is Jehovah Elohim? The answer is by 3 steps from below. They are all symbols and emblematic, mutually and correlatively, of spirit, soul, and body, which is man, or the circular transformed into spirit, the soul of the world, and the body, or earth. Stepping out of the circle of infinity that no man comprehendeth, Ein Sof, the Kabbalic synonym for Parabrahma, for the zero ana, a kern of the Mazdians, or for any other unknowable, becomes one. The Ekad, the Eka, the Ahu, then he or it is transformed by evolution into the one in many. The Dhyani Buddhas, or the Elohim, or again the Amshash, pins his 3rd step being taken into generations of the flesh or man. And from man, or Jehovah, male and female, the inner divine entity becomes, on the metaphysical plane, one more, the Elohim. So the 3 and 7 is referring to the 7 densities of consciousness that the earth has to go through. So essentially there are 7 earths in this evolutionary process, or the 7 spheres inhabited by men. Elohim is supposed to represent 0 or the all. Then Elohim becomes Jehovah, which we know now that means male and female principle still together before separation, and from Jehovah to man, spirit, soul, and matter. Okay, so on the macrocosmic level, the spirit of the universe, or the universal mind, or eternal ideation, combined with the soul of the world, which is fohat, or this creative force, or this will of the universe, and the body, which is supposed to be earth. On a microcosmic level, spirit, mind, which is again the mind, the cosmic ideation, combined with the soul, which is fohat, or the electrifying principle, and the body, which is man. All of these have been alluded to in philosophy, in religion, and other ancient texts. The 3, mind, body, and soul, become the 7 evolving through the 7 densities of consciousness. That is what that is trying to explain. Now, the Kabbalistic idea is identical with the esotericism or the archaic period. This esotericism is the common property of all and belongs neither to the Aryan fifth race nor to any of its numerous subraces. It cannot be claimed by the Turanians, so-called the Egyptians, Chinese, Chaldeans, nor any of the 7 divisions of the 5th root race, but really belongs to the 3rd and 4th root races, whose descendants we find in the seed of the 5th, the earliest Aryans. The circle was with every nation the symbol of the unknown, boundless space, the abstract garb of an ever-present abstraction, the incognizable deity. It represents limitless time and eternity. The Zirana's Akern is also the boundless circle of the unknown time, from which circle issues the radiant light, or the universal sun, or Mazad. And the latter is identical with Chronos in his Ialian form, that of a circle. For the circle is Sar and Saros, or cycle, and the Babylonian god whose circular horizon was the visible symbol of the invisible, while the sun was the one circle from which proceeded the cosmic orbs, and of which he was considered the leader. Zero Ana is the chakra, or the circle of Vishnu, the mysterious emblem, which is, according to the definition of the mystics, a curve of such a nature that as to any the least possible part thereof, if the curve be protracted either way, it will proceed and finally re-enter upon itself and form one and the 3 same curves, or that which we call the circle. No better definition could thus be given of the natural symbol and the evident nature of deity, which having its circumference everywhere, the boundless, has therefore its central point also everywhere. In other words, is in every point of the universe. The invisible deity is thus also the Dayan Kohans, or the Rishis, the primitive 7 and the 9 without the 10, including their synthetical unit from which it steps into man. Returning to the commentary of stanza 4, the reader will understand why, while the trans-Himalayan chakra has inscribed within it the triangle first line, cube the second line, and the pentacle with the dot in the center, thus and some other variations. The Kabbalistic circle of the Elohim reveals, when the letter of the words Elohim are numerically read, the famous numeral 13514 or the anagram 31415. The astronomical pi number, or the hidden meaning of the Dhyani Buddhas, of the Gerbers, the Geberim or the Kabiris, and the Elohim, all signifying great men, titans, heavenly men, and on earth, the giants. The 7 was a sacred number with every nation, but none applied it to more philosophically materialistic use than the Hebrews. With these, it was preeminently the generative number, and 9 the male causative one, forming and shown by the Kabbalistic the orts, the tree of the Garden of Eden, the double hermaphrodite rod of the 4th race. Whereas the Hindus and the Aryans generally, the significance was manifold and related almost entirely to the purely metaphysical and the astronomical truth. Their rishis and gods, their demons and heroes have historical and ethnical reasons, and the Aryans never made their religion rest solely on philosophical symbols as the old Hebrews have done. This is found in the exoteric Hindu scriptures. That these accounts are blinds is shown by their contradicting each other, a different construction being found in almost every Purana and epic poem. Read esoterically, they will all yield the same meaning. Thus, one account enumerates 7 words, elusive of the nether worlds, also 7 in number. These 14 upper and nether worlds have nothing to do with the classification of the septenary chain and belong to the purely ethereal, invisible world. These will be noticed elsewhere. Suffice for the present to show that they are purposefully referred to as though they belong to the chain, although enumerations calls the 7 worlds, earth, sky, heaven, middle region, place of birth, mansion of the blessed, and abode of the truth, placing the sons of Brahma in the 6th division, and stating the 5th or Janaloka to be that where animals destroyed in the general configuration are born again. Some real esoteric teaching is giving in the symbolism. He who is prepared for it will understand the hidden meaning. Y'all know that sound like a bunch of hoopla to me, so here is what I needed, or I pulled from it. So it's kind of hard to explain, but they're referring to the symbolism that has been used to describe the seven worlds or planetary chains of Earth, how they have been divided and misconstrued and mistranslated. But what we need to know is that the seven material planetary versions of Earth are separate from the seven spiritual planetary versions of Earth. It doesn't matter what the symbol they use across any of these ancient civilizations. They always numerically equate to 134514 on the spiritual side and 31415 on the material side. Also, apparently, when esoterically they are talking about the Dhyana Buddhas or planetary spirits, they are referred to all signifying great men, titans, heavenly men, and on Earth they're called the giants. So we may have been fed false narratives about who the titans and the giants really were in order to demonize or fear or cause fear for these deities meant to help us. But that part is not clear. But if it is true, that's very on brand for the powers that be, hiding stuff and demonizing stuff that's supposed to help us. Now, part 2 of stanza 5 is just giving us the two roles that fohat plays, one on a macrocosmic level and one on a microcosmic level. But what we really just need to know is that it divides the spiritual versions of Earth from the physical versions of Earth. And it also divides up our evolutionary process using those centers of force, which are the chakra system. Now, stanza 5, part 3 says, "He is their guiding spirit and leader. When he commences work, he separates the spark of the lower kingdom, or the mineral atoms that float and thrill with joy in their radiant dwelling, the gaseous clouds, and form therewith the germ of wheels. He places them in the 6 directions of space, and the one in the middle, the center wheel." Part A says, "Wheels, as already explained, are the centers of force around which primordial cosmic matter expands and passing through all the 6 stages of consolidation, becoming spherical, and ends by being transformed into globes or spheres. It is the one of the fundamental dogma of esoteric cosmology that during the kaplas or aeons of life motion, which during these periods of rest pulsates and thrills through every slumbering atom, assumes an ever-growing tendency from the first awakening of the cosmos to the new day, to the circular movement. The deity becomes a whirlwind. They are also called rotae, the moving wheels of the celestial orbs participating in the world's creation. When the meaning refers to the animating principle of the stars and planets, for the Kabbalah, they are represented by the Ophanim, the angels of the spheres and stars, in which they are the informing souls. So the main part of this explanation is going to come from Theosophy Wiki, because it's really hard for me to understand this part. But think of the wheels or the globes as evolutionary cycles, kind of like the chakras, because they are the center forces. Just how we have chakras, Earth has chakras as well. Okay, so there are 7 objective and 7 subjective globes, meaning that Earth can exist in the material, but it also exists in the spiritual, just like we exist in the physical and we exist in the spiritual. So these are called the worlds of cause, which is spiritual, and the world of effect, which is the material. Now, our Earth occupies the lower turning point where spirit matter is equal. So again, this is the idea that we have 7 material earths and 7 spiritual earths, like a rosary composed of white and black beads alternating with each other, so that the effects, the latter, the direct result produced by the former. Thus, it becomes evident that every sphere of cause, and our Earth is one, is not only interlinked with and surrounded by, but actually separated from its nearest neighbor, the higher sphere of causality, meaning that, again, spirit and matter of Earth is also separated by an impenetrable atmosphere in its spiritual sense of effects bordering on and even interlinking, never mixing with the next sphere. For one is active, the other passive, the world of causes positive, that of effects negative. The intermediary spheres, being but the projected shadows of the worlds of cause, are negative by the last. They are the great halting places, the stations in which the new self-conscious ego to be, the self-begotten progeny of the old and the disembodied egos of our planet, are gastrated. Before the new phoenix, reborn of the ashes of its parents, can soar higher to a better, more spiritual and perfect world, still a world of matter, it has to pass through the process of the new birth, so to say. So this is telling us that we are co-creating our worlds, and then this world constantly goes through cycles of rebirth before we can level up to the next level. So you have to shed the old you to make space for the new you. So we go through these cycles as well, and Earth in mankind, like the sun, moon, and planets, have all their growth changes, developments, and gradual evolutions in their life period. They are born, become infants, then children, adolescents, grow up, in bodies, grow old, and finally die. So every life cycle on globe D, which is where we are right now, this fifth root race, our earth is composed of 7 root races. So they commence with the ethereal and end with the spiritual on the double line of physical and moral evolution, from the beginning of the terrestrial rounds to its close. One is a planetary round from globe A to globe G, the 7th. The other, the globe round of the terrestrial. So our earth has the visible representative of the invisible superior fellow globes. Its lords or principles has to live as have the others through 7 rounds. During first 3, it forms and consolidates. During the 4th, it settles and hardens. During the last 3, it gradually returns to the first ethereal form. It is spiritualized, so to say. So these globes or wheels are evolutionary cycles or ascension cycles. In short, what you really need to understand is that we have spiritual evolutionary cycles or spiritual levels of consciousness, but we also have physical levels of consciousness, and these two things are separate from each other, right? So our whole purpose of coming down here is starting at the lowest level of consciousness and working our way up, right? And when we have these root races are us having to go from the lowest form of consciousness, which is going to be the material, the minerals, right? Then go through the plant kingdom, go through the animal kingdom, go through the human kingdom, which is where we are now, right? Not human kingdom, but mankind, right? And then work our way back to spirit. That is the whole purpose of every evolutionary cycle. But just because you're somewhere in the physical, don't mean that you're there in the spiritual, right? And we really need to understand that we are 3 parts: mind, body, and soul. So all 3 of those have to be developed. All 3 of those have to be nurtured. All 3 of those have to evolve, okay? So your mentality has to evolve. You as a spiritual being has to evolve. And then also you meaning your mind has to evolve, right? But also you in this material world, you in your physical form have to evolve as well. How do we evolve from this lowest level to the highest level? Those are through our chakra systems, right? Our chakra systems in our human body help us to evolve from the material to the spiritual, right? Once we develop those lower levels, we get past that heart space. Now we're in the spiritual levels, right? And we have to develop those as well. The earth also has a chakra system. So the earth is also going through this evolutionary cycle as well. Everything that is in this manifested universe is going through this evolutionary cycle. Okay. So, how do you get there? Again, you get through ascension through your chakra system. The next part says this law of vortical movement is primordial matter is one of the oldest conceptions of Greek philosophy, whose first historical sages were nearly all initiates of the mysteries. The Greek had it from the Egyptians and the latter from the Chaldeans, who had been the pupils of Brahmanan of the esoteric schools. Leucippus and Democritus of Abdera, the pupils of the Magi, taught that this gyratory movement of the atoms and spheres exists from eternity. Hicetus, Heraclitus, Ecphantus, Pythagoras, and all of his pupils taught the rotation of the earth, and the Aryabhata of India, Aristarchus, Seleucus, and Archimedes calculated its revolution as scientifically as the astronomers do now. While the theory of the elemental vortices was known for Anaxagoras and maintained by him 500 years BC and nearly 2000 before it was taken up by the Galileo, Descartes, Swedenborg, and finally, with slight modifications, by Sir W. Thomson. All such knowledge, if justice be only done to it, is an echo of the archaic doctrine, an attempt to explain which is now being made, how men of the last few centuries have come to the same ideas and conclusions that were taught as axiomatic truths in the secrecy of the Advaita dozens of millenniums ago, is a question that is treated separately. Some were led to it by the natural progress in physical science and by independent observation. Others, such as Copernicus, Swedenborg, and a few more, Their great learning now withstands owed their knowledge far more to intuitive than to acquired ideas developed in the usual way by the course of study. A lot of the great philosophers, occultists that came before us came to this understanding that we are following an evolutionary process by either studying science, right, studying the material, or others came to it by pure intuition, by the spiritual side of them, this pure knowingness. So by the 6 directions of space is here meant the double triangle, the junction and blending together of pure spirit and matter, of the arupa and the rupa, of which the triangles are the symbols. This double triangle is a sign of Vishnu, as is Solomon's seal, and the Sira Antara of the Brahim. All right, so if you need a visual of what this 6 directions of space is, you can look at the Star of David, commonly used in Judaism and also referred to as Solomon's seal. So it's the 6-pointed star, which is the figure of the macrocosm, composed of the 2 triangles respectively, white and black, crossed and interlaced, or our society's symbol known as Solomon's seal in Europe, and as the sign of Vishnu in India. Is made to represent the universal spirit and matter. One white point, which symbolizes the former ascending heavenward, and the lower point of its black triangle inclining earthwards. So the double triangle representing symbolically the macrocosm or great universe contains in itself, beside the idea of the duality as shown in the 2 colors or the 2 triangles, the universe of spirit and that of matter, those of the unity or the trinity or the Pythagorean tetrachydis, the perfect square, and up to the dodecagon and the dodecahedron. The double triangle is the perfect 7. So in all the old Sanskrit words, Vedic and Tantric, you find the number 6 mentioned more than the number 7. Now this last figure, the central point being implied, for it is the germ of the 6 and their matrix. It is then thus the interlaced triangles inscribed in a circle, the central point standing for 7th, and the circle, the Mahakasha, endless space. For the 7th universal principle, the interlaced triangle, the upper pointing one is wisdom concealed, and the downward pointing one is wisdom revealed in the phenomenal world. Okay, cause and effect. So the double triangle symbolizes the great passive and the great active, the male and the female, the Purusha and the Prakriti. Each triangle is a trinity because it's presenting a triple aspect. So the white represents in its straight lines knowledge, the knower, and that which is known. The black form, color, and substance, also creative, preservative, and destructive forces, and are mutually correlating. So part 3 of this stanza is just describing how the fohat, or the creative force universal, will start its work by dividing the centers of force or evolutionary densities of consciousness and putting them into place, how it separates the spiritual and the physical, but also how they are all intrinsically connected, and the symbols used to display that connection. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and end the episode here because I don't want us to stop halfway through part 4. So the first part of stanza 5 is explaining the creation of the planetary chain, which our planet exists in, which is done by fohat, which has 2 definitions. On a macrocosmic level, it is the love energy that is emanating with the ray to direct the will of the universe, also known as the creative force of wisdom that executes the universal plan. It also separates the spirit or spiritual from the matter, the material worlds. On a microcosmic level, it creates the centers of forces on earth and with man, which are the evolutionary path that we will follow to ascension, also called wheels or our chakra system, which are just energy portals or energy vortexes of wisdom. To reach a new energy vortex or density of consciousness, you have to go through the death and rebirth process where you release the old version of yourself to become the version you need to be at this new level. You have to balance the lower energy portals to advance through from the material to the spiritual. There are 7 root races or levels of density that Earth has to go through, which comes with planetary spirits meant to help us ascend. There are also symbols like Solomon's seal and the Star of David that represent this process on a macrocosmic level. That's the gist of what this episode is about, okay? Now, I do have a couple announcements. I'm so excited about the direction of this podcast. The first season was everything we needed to know about us, how we function, and the resources available to us so that we can live this experience in the most seamless way possible, right? And then this season was about everything we needed to know about what governs this universe and how it was created. So what components are of this universe and what it's made of and how it operates. That's some good shit to me. So I'm really, really proud of this. So we're going to finish off these last 3 stanzas, which should be about 5 more episodes. Then we'll be taking a break for the summer and returning in August of this year. I really want this podcast to be something that gets us through the cold months. So I'm excited to keep going with this. So thank you to everyone who has subscribed and is constantly tapping in. YouTube will be where I go if TikTok gets banned, but that could be from years from now, because it does look like ByteDance is going to go ahead and take this to federal court. But still, and so make sure you subscribe to my channel. It is in the link in the bio on all of my social media pages. My name is @BigTaj with 2 J's on Instagram, 3 J's on TikTok. Okay. Now the resources for this episode are the same: The Secret Doctrine by Helena P. Blavatsky, Theosophy Wiki, and The Secret Book of Dizon. And that is it for this week's episode. I love y'all deep, and I'll see y'all next week.